Crazy girlfriends. What's your side of the story?
What?
Years ago, I met a guy and felt an instant connection. For a while, he felt the same way, and things were really intense. But then, for some reason I couldn't understand, he started to ignore me. This all happened over 3 years. When he stopped paying attention to me, it made me really upset. I was so emotionally involved with him that just being near him made my body react. Everything felt right when I was with him. So when I realized he didn't feel the same way, I was confused and hurt. I was so hurt and angry, and not knowing why made me act strangely. I became obsessed with him. I never called him a lot or anything like that. Instead, I would try to be at places where I knew he would be, at the right time. When I heard from a friend about an ex-girlfriend of his, I got really jealous and worried. Was he seeing her again? Why? Why her and not me? What was wrong with me? I became obsessed with her too, and that's when things got weird. Started driving past both of their houses. If I saw his car at her house, I would drive around and around until he left. I would check when he was last online on Facebook, that features like a tool, and I would try to guess what they were doing based on how often he logged on. After a while, instead of driving by, I started wearing a disguise and walking past her house, but only when he was there. The pain I felt when I saw his car there was too much. I had to know what they were doing. Why her and not me? I started crawling in the bushes outside her house, wearing a disguise, trying to hear what they were talking about. I heard them doing stuff a few times. It was creepy, and I hate that I know that. My behavior got worse, and I did some other things I won't mention here. Finally, I started hanging around outside his house. One night, he came out and saw me in my disguise. He said my name and left, instead of getting angry or weirded out. After that, I stopped all my strange behavior, but I still wonder why I did it. I don't know myself. The worst part was that during all those lonely, sad nights, I knew I was acting crazy and weird, but I still did it. At the time, I was getting help for trying to hurt myself, but I kept acting strangely. I never told my therapists about him or her or what I was doing. I wish I could say I was really out of my mind and hearing voices, but I chose to do those things. I hated doing it, but I still did it, even though I seemed like a normal, well-educated person. It's been a few years now, and when I think about it, it feels like it was someone else doing those things. Why did I do that? Will I do it again? Why did I get so weird about him and no one else? I don't know. Well, certainly a good sign that she's aware of how crazy she acted. Some people would just think they're behaving appropriately and are not obsessed. Story 2. I was meeting his friends for the first time. We all went out together and then came back to his house for drinks. I was talking to his friends, trying to get to know them and be social. He was upstairs talking to another friend. A girl walked in and went upstairs, and I didn't think much of it until his friend came down and started trying to get me to go somewhere else. I realized they were trying to distract me. Since I'd been drinking, everything seemed like a bigger deal. I made a scene and went to knock on the locked door. I might have started screaming because what else was I supposed to do when the guy I'm seeing is in a locked room with another pretty girl? I was embarrassed. I couldn't be calmed down and felt alone because they were all his friends. I was screaming, crying, and making a fuss. So that's how I became known as the crazy one. Wow. His friends are terrible as well. We don't stand for that in my friend group. Cheat on your partner in front of us and you get canceled. Story 3. For me, I was with a guy for 4 years. The last 6 months of it, I had no idea he was cheating on me. I found out. I got upset and I asked him to come over to talk it over. Mind you, I was really rational about the situation. I felt sad, not only that he cheated on me, but that he must have felt trapped to do it in the first place. So I basically asked him why after all this time he couldn't just tell me that he wasn't interested in me anymore. He responded, "I just didn't want to hurt you." Well, that was not nice, but okay. A few days later, I check on my Facebook and have all these messages from people that I'm not necessarily friends with. I just knew them because they were friends with my ex. Well, their messages weren't kind to me, and even people for some reason were making notes and passing them along like those chain letters or fill in the blanks. So basically, these notes were poorly edited or photoshopped. Might as well have been paint. Screenshots of convos where people twisted my words, making it look like I was the bad guy. Basically, I ignored these things. I was upset, but more embarrassed because honestly I found that my ex had been actually telling people these things were true. I asked him to kindly stop, but he kept insisting that he was stating facts. I kept telling him that those things weren't true. Soon after, he decided to come up with new things. Now he was telling people that I begged for money and made him buy everything because I'm selfish. People bought it. Although I was the one who had a job, he never worked, so I asked him again kindly not to say things like that and he should be over me and focus on his new relationship. Well, it didn't stop. I got messages from his girlfriend about mistreating him and begging him to stop with my lies, and she told me some other stuff. Finally, I had enough. After all the pestering, I ran into him at the mall where he greeted me with a smile and gestured to give me a hug like we're friends. I told him that's not appropriate and really, I just don't want to talk to him anymore. His girlfriend was meeting up with him and she stopped by as I was walking away from him and she started screaming at me in the middle of the mall. I kept trying to explain I had no intentions of meeting him there. All the while she's screaming, calling me crazy, he's recording it all. I finally start to walk away. Confrontation isn't my thing. She grabs me and keeps telling me to quit obsessing over her boyfriend. I struggle to get away, and finally a security guy shows up and she explains how I'm causing commotion. He kicks me out. Hours later, I go on Facebook and see I have 75 messages. I am tagged in something. Well, my ex recorded the whole thing where I did nothing and posted it on Facebook. People called me all kinds of names, so I don't use Facebook anymore. So much drama. All the time I was the crazy ex-girlfriend, and honestly, I was more heartbroken that he was sad being with me than the actual breakup. I wanted to file a police report. Never did. Eventually got caught doing a crime. I've been called to court, never showed, and fled to Canada. Story 4. Former crazy girlfriend here. Accused my boyfriend in high school of having an affair with his best friend who was a girl. It made me uncomfortable when they were alone together or when he would constantly talk about her. For instance, he told her how beautiful she was at prom and never commented on my dress. His guy friend, who's still a close friend of mine to this day, ended up pretty much being my date while he hung out with this girl. A lot of his guy friends told me I was just jealous and irrational. I broke up with him feeling like the crazy girlfriend. Fast forward 4 years and me and my guy friend were talking and he said that this ex-boyfriend of mine almost had a restraining order from his former best friend who was a girl. Turns out he was in love with her for years and she led him on big time, would tease him and use him as a tool to make herself feel better when she needed a confidence boost. Pretty much. He ended up constantly badgering her about how much he loved her to the point of getting hammered and showing up at her house, looking at her Facebook, etc. But she had to completely remove him from her life because it was freaking her out. Turns out he was a crazy one, and he was cheating on me. Now if I get that feeling, I just end the relationship right then and there. Not dealing with that again. I don't understand why people that are clearly really into other people want to date in the first place. If you're dating, you should not be constantly comparing them to someone you have a huge crush on and or your exes. Story 5. I was young and naive. I was head over heels in love with a guy, and in my mind, letting it go wasn't an option. In my dumb brain, I thought somehow that if I talked and bugged him enough, that I would somehow figure out the way to fix it. This included a night of me showing up at his door and crying for 2 hours, asking him why. To be fair, he did lead me on for a while, telling me we would be together after he got through his whole I want to be alone period. Obviously, that didn't happen. It definitely made me grow up a lot. I realize now, especially that when a man decides he's done with a relationship, it's definitely done. So yeah, basically I was just a crazy idealistic girl who thought if I asked enough questions, I would get an answer I would want to hear. Story 6. My ex-boyfriend spent years making me believe that I didn't need a backup plan. We were going to move in together and get married. I didn't have any other plans. He did this by having serious talks with me and also by complaining nonstop until I gave in. He criticized me because he didn't like my friends, and he accidentally went through my emails, Facebook, and phone at least twice each time. He used what he found to tell me what a terrible girlfriend I was. It turned out he was having an affair with a girl who lived down the hall, the same girl he helped get a job at his company. She was the girl he threw a double birthday party for, the one he invited to our dinners, and the one he had lunch with once a week. So while he was telling me to spend less time with my friends, to love and depend only on him, and calling me a bad girlfriend, he was cheating on me. For years. He messed up my life and sent me back years. Money I could have saved, time I could have spent with other people or in school or work. He knew he was ruining my future and didn't care. So I texted his mom and dad, and I called his workplace to tell them he was having an affair with a coworker. It doesn't seem like he lost his job, which is too bad. I would have liked him to start all over from the beginning, too. Our mutual friends wanted to stay neutral. Our response was that we don't have friends in common. I know they've all told everyone I'm a crazy, spiteful woman. The truth is, yes I am. 100%. Story 7. I wasn't the crazy girlfriend, I was the crazy wife. He became convinced I was cheating on him and that I was crazy. I didn't want to tell him the passwords to my computer or emails. I bought a new phone after my old one died. It told me to input a PIN, so I did. I was in the middle of exams at the time, so I was spending a lot more time at college, with classmates who didn't necessarily know. At the same time, I was being called into work a lot, so I was rarely home. Clearly, this all meant something was going on. I left my computer on one night, and he took the chance. I'm not too sure what he saw, a Facebook conversation with a friend from class, but he became convinced I was having an affair. It didn't matter that I literally didn't have the time to have one, nor the energy, but he became furious. He demanded access to everything and started following me around the house, calling me a bunch of names so I'd show him my emails and FB convos and internet history. I was so sick and stressed that I caved and said, I suppose I had. I mean, I talked to guys he didn't know. Maybe I was cheating? He told me I was sick. That's what really sticks out, looking back. At some point, I left the house that night and made it to a friend's place. I have no memory of the drive from mine to hers. I was in a daze. Everything he said kept repeating in my head, and I checked myself into a health clinic. I was discharged a couple of weeks later with a diagnosis. He clung to that diagnosis like a life raft. I went back to him because I didn't know what else to do. My father didn't want me to come home because he thought he and I just needed to work some things out. I had no idea how to tell him the truth. At that stage, I didn't know what the truth was. So we went to couples therapy. He accused me of a variety of different things, lying and cheating mostly. I learned that if I didn't tell him 100% of everything all the time, it was a lie. It got to the point where I had to tell him every single thing I did during the day, who I talked to, where I went, what I did. At times it wasn't enough. It had to be more. I began embellishing the truth because it wasn't enough. The truth wasn't, well, truthy enough. All the time he told me I was sick, made it sound like I was disgusting. About 8 months after I was discharged from the hospital, I was told I no longer met the criteria for my diagnosis and hadn't for quite some time. I went home and told him. I was so happy. I was certifiably sane. The first thing he said to me was, "So what are you?" He needed me to be sick. If I wasn't sick, then the problems we had were equally shared. He had to take some responsibility and accountability in the relationship. I constantly tried to meet him in the middle, but it wasn't enough. It was black or white, all or nothing. We went back to couples therapy. In our last session, the therapist clearly sided with me. She said as such. She said I was in the right and that he needed to stop complaining and realize I was trying to meet him halfway, and he had to do the same. He said he'd had enough. Our marriage was done. He went to stay with his brother and sister-in-law. I had 2 days to get out of the house. Although I was in a daze that night, I quickly packed up, and within a day, I was gone. This was 12 months ago. Still have people coming up to me and asking if I was the one to call an end to it. He's apparently been crying to friends, playing the pity card. He tells everyone I cheated on him with dozens of men, but in actuality, he's the only man I've ever slept with. He tells them I'm crazy. I've lost some friends, but I've also discovered who my true friends are. He contacted me about 3 months after he left and said he wants a letter from my psychiatrist while I was in the hospital to state I'm fit for court. I reluctantly called my psych and he laughed, saying there's no reason for him to write anything. There's nothing wrong with me. I've moved on. I'm with someone else now. I will admit I'm anxious a lot and constantly watch myself. I never know where the line is. I'm always looking over my shoulder, minding my words so I don't say something wrong. I'm scared of making waves and upsetting someone. I've moved on, but I still have a long way to go, I suppose. Story 8. Crazy X here. I went to study abroad for a full year, and before I left, he started to ignore me and tell me to quit whenever I was exposing my opinion, even in front of friends and family. After that, he would just not answer my texts or tell me I was writing to get attention and ruin his day. I just moved to another country. I reached my limit when he ignored me for a full week. We broke up and I decided to remove all contact for a few days. When I unblocked him to try to become friends, he suddenly saw what he had been doing wrong and I decided to give him a second chance. As soon as I told him that a guy at my university had tried to flirt with me, he said I was obviously looking for a new man. And I had all this planned. This routine kept going until he explicitly called me names in a text. I blocked him everywhere and ignored his texts and calls for 2 weeks. He told me I was doing a ghosting thing. I made out with another guy at the time, and after he found out, he sent me a message to tell me that he was going to ruin my social life in my city for cheating on him. Soon after he told me he was going to leave me alone because he had a new girlfriend, I sent him a message asking if he was kidding. He called me a crazy girl. So for his friends, I am a cheater because I cheated on him and had a new boyfriend. I'm crazy because I was pestering him for weeks in order to get back together and being extremely jealous of his new girlfriends. All of this, of course, according to him. The last thing I knew is that he's a good guy and I was the bad guy who made him act like that because I must have a problem. Story 9. During the beginning of my relationship with my current boyfriend, a mutual friend of ours got weirdly competitive with him and dropped hints that he had been with me. Never happened. In fact, I wasn't even attracted to him. Because we were all friends, I talked to this friend about my relationship with my boyfriend and I likely overshared, but he used that information to make my boyfriend paranoid and insinuate all sorts of things that never happened. My boyfriend, who had been cheated on by his previous girlfriend and who was generally a cynical guy, read into all of these hints and believed him, but didn't bring up his suspicions for about another month or so. at which point he totally blindsided me with an accusation out of nowhere. He had me endlessly repeat encounters or conversations with this friend, and did so many different times over several months, and expected me to remember conversations that I never knew would be significant in the first place. My boyfriend would freak out if I didn't respond to a text or call on time. If I stayed late at work or class, he would stop talking to me for 3 days at a time with no explanation because something bothered him. I started to go a bit mad and to question my reality. My friend stopped wanting much to do with either of us because I was completely distraught almost all the time, but trying so hard to keep us together because I loved him. I would always be on the verge of tears, fidgety, and paranoid about anything that I did or said being used against me. The whole campus seemed to know that our relationship was not normal, and while most people believed me, doubt was raised in their minds by both of us. It's nearly impossible to prove that something hasn't occurred, so I didn't have any way out. After recounting my interactions with his friend to him again one day, he claimed he believed me. We were more or less okay for 3 or 4 months. Then out of nowhere again, he accuses me and tells me he didn't actually believe me, but was just trying to. My trust in him was now shattered, as much as his trust in me. This continued to happen for about 1.5 years, before eventually I managed to set the record straight by calling this mutual friend, while my boyfriend sat and listened silently to our call. And he mentioned that my boyfriend thought I had cheated with him, and he claimed not to know where that thought came from, even though I know he was intentionally trying to insinuate that. Finally, my boyfriend accepted the truth, but it took another 6 months to a year before I was able to trust that I wouldn't be falsely accused again. Our relationship is great now, but we lost a ton of friends in the drama, and my family will likely never fully accept him because of how he treated me. Just hope nobody jokes around her boyfriend that the phone call was pre-planned, because that will start her back at step 1. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 10. I was never officially his girlfriend, but I was dating a guy I worked with. Another girl from work started saying he was her boyfriend. I asked him if he was seeing both of us, since we weren't exclusive and he wasn't crazy to think he might be, but he got really upset and defensive. He said they were definitely not involved and that she was the one who was crazy. I believed him. Then, when I quit my job, he invited her to my going-away party, and she was talking about their 2-year relationship. I confronted him about it, and he told me I was crazy and making everything up. He said I made up our dates, going to his house, and all the intimate stuff we did. He told me he was never attracted to me and that I was crazy and should stay away from him. He only told me this, not his girlfriend of 2 years who never found out. After that, I needed therapy for a while because I started to wonder, what if I just made it all up somehow? But I definitely didn't, or at least that's what my therapist said. He told me I had a very pragmatic view in life and a firm grasp on healthy coping mechanisms. Plus, at least 2 coworkers knew he was cheating on her with me, so it couldn't have all been in our imaginations. Story 11. I didn't know I had anxiety until recently. He was my first boyfriend and everything was okay at the beginning, but then I got really jealous and worried about his female friends, even those I used to be friends with. They like to joke around and say things that are a bit wild, which I thought was flirting, and things got worse from there. Some of those friends started avoiding him because they felt they couldn't enjoy their friendship with him when I was around, so my ex felt like I was taking his friends away. He wanted me to change, so I tried to relax and think positive, but I couldn't. I read books about relationships, but a lot of the advice was about changing how I think, so that didn't work either. I went to therapy, but it was just general talking and only lasted a few sessions because I had to move. I was really struggling, wanting to change but messing up every time. From his point of view, I was being difficult on purpose and not trying hard enough to change. He said I was sweet, kind, and loving, but the jealousy made me hard to love. That was the only thing he didn't like about me. I wouldn't have known it was anxiety until a friend with some knowledge of psychology listened to me and suggested I see a therapist who specializes in anxiety. I did, and more than one therapist said I definitely had anxiety. I decided to get cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, but by the time I got my diagnosis, my ex didn't care anymore and wouldn't talk to me. He was tired of it all, especially since he was mad at me about something else. He broke up with me a few days later, saying I was just making excuses and that I wouldn't change. Part of me wishes he could have stayed, but another part knows he put up with me longer than he should have. That was just a few months ago and it still hurts. I wish he would come back, but I'm trying not to hope too much. He made sure we couldn't talk by blocking me everywhere. I wasn't telling him about the anxiety to make excuses, but to explain why I was the way I was. I wanted to say I was sorry and that now I knew I was wrong, I could work on getting better, and that would be my way of apologizing. Sadly, I don't think he believes me. I wish he would think about this. If I was making it up, why would I spend money on therapy when it's really expensive? He knows I'm not rich enough to waste money like that. Some of our mutual friends have taken his side and said hurtful things, like how other people with my illness don't act as badly as I did. One of them, who knows nothing about psychology, even doubted my diagnosis and suggested I might have a personality disorder like BPD. And just after he broke up with me, he invited a bunch of women and some of their friends who didn't even know me to lunch just to talk badly about me and make fun of me. And they still do sometimes. I still miss him though. And I just think he was really angry when he did those things after we broke up. I wish we hadn't ended so badly, but CBT has been really helpful. I hope I'm not getting my hopes up for nothing, but it feels like this could really help me change. Still learning a lot about anxiety and how to deal with my thoughts, but my therapist helped me understand generalized anxiety disorder, or JD, as something where your brain can turn off and is always on alert, like a security system that's broken. I learned that anxiety can make negative emotions stronger, so while the jealousy might have been real, my behavior went too far. I also looked back at my life and I realized that some of the things that happened might also be connected to anxiety, and how growing up with parents who were too worried and protective probably led to my GAD. After the shock of realizing I've had anxiety for a long time, I apologized to some friends for old arguments and told them about my diagnosis. They told me to stop apologizing for things that happened a long time ago, and have been very supportive. I'm glad to have people who don't think I'm crazy and still want me in their lives. But I wish my ex was one of those people. Still miss him a lot. Story 12. Not many people know this, but I was married once. My ex-husband was a real pain and I was naive. We had only been dating for 6 weeks when I got pregnant. I'd like to say it was because it broke, but it was really because he told me he had never met anyone like me before. He said he was so in love that he wanted to marry me and start a family right away. I came from a really messed up home, so I was happy that someone wanted to love me forever. After I was pregnant, he told me I didn't need to work anymore. A couple of months later, we were too poor to stay in our neighborhood, so he moved us to a farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. He stopped insuring his truck and started using my car to go to work. If I had an appointment, he would take time off work and drive me. But if I wanted to see friends or family, the answer was always no. Things got really bad after my son was born. He didn't show up for the birth, and when my son was born at 8 p.m., he went home to get a change of clothes and didn't come back for 2 days. I got postpartum, which was really anxiety that would hit me 45 minutes before he was supposed to come home from work every day. He became angry and wouldn't give me any privacy. He had set up a camera to watch me at home in the living room, saying it was for the baby. He somehow saw every text message, website I visited, and photo I took on my phone. I don't know how he did it. If I wanted to shower, he would wait until I closed the shower door and then unlock the bathroom door. He would tell me to hurry up because our son was crying. This made me more anxious, so I decided to do something. I got a prescription for Cipralex and Ativan. Since he controlled the money and gave me a sort of allowance when he gave me money for the prescription, I took the medicine but didn't fill the Ativan prescription. I kept the money instead. I saved enough to take a cab to the bus stop and then a bus to the nearest courthouse. I asked the lawyer what I could do, and she said there was nothing I could do if I was still living in the same house. No custody, nothing. I would have to find a way to support myself. He found out I had gone to the courthouse because he noticed I wasn't on the baby cams. Then he checked my internet history and saw I had visited the courthouse website for custody information. I didn't know he was tracking my internet use. I admitted I wanted to leave and planned to take my son. He tried to leave me out of our house, and when I tried to hurt him, he called the police and said I mistreated him. The police saw his nail marks and said they couldn't tell who started it, especially since I just cried when they tried to talk to me. He called Child Protective Services and they said I could only see my son with someone else there and that I had to find a new place to live. I could only see my son after a full psychiatric assessment. I just wanted to leave, and the marriage was so bad that I was always anxious. So everyone was told by him that I was crazy and lost custody of my newborn. 6 weeks later, the psychiatric evaluation was done, showing I never failed a prescription and had never taken Ativan. He wanted custody of our child, so he lied about my health, turning my anxiety from not liking him into me being completely psychotic. People still think I'm not stable, but it never happened. I now have custody of my son because his lies were proven false in court. If I had failed that Ativan prescription, I would never have seen my son again. So I'm not crazy, and he now has 3 children with 3 different mothers. Story 13. I dated this guy for 2.5 months. He moves in about 2 weeks into us dating. Apparently, his family treated him so badly, so me, being a nice person, after consulting my mom, offered him to move in. First month is all good. It's great having him there. But then he changes. He started disrespecting my brother and mom and basically pestered me for dropping out of school. Anytime someone asked something, I'd go to answer and he'd say, "I'll answer. I finished school." The thing that really pushed me over the edge and made me dump him was when he started mistreating my cats. My mom's friend's cat was just injured and it cost him nearly $1,000. We couldn't afford that if our cats had an injury, so I spoke to him and asked him to tone down his aggressiveness. He did, but only for a day or two. So I broke up with him over Facebook as he was at his mom's house, who went off and accused me of dating him as a rebound and that I pitied him. He went and complained to anyone and everyone that would listen and say that I was a crazy girl that treated him horribly and that I was clingy. I was sick at the time, so I wanted cuddles. He moves out but forgets a few things and comes to pick them up the next day. He sent me a list of what he forgot and said that if any of that stuff is in any way damaged, he was going to do something. Gave his stuff back and blocked him. 2 months later, I unblock him, thinking he'll be over me and stop being mean. Nope. He sends me a message saying how much he misses me and wants me back and says he's sorry for how he acted. I told him he acted mean and he went crazy. Oh, but I'm the crazy, clingy one. All his friends believe him, of course. All my friends believed me when they showed them the screenshots. Next he had after me, she messaged me and we talked. Apparently he said mean things about me to her. She ended up saying that I'm actually a really nice person, but now I actually have fears of seeing him. Been to the police and they couldn't do anything. Can't wait to move states so I can stop living in fear. Story 14. I was dating and later engaged to a man who was a liar. He would lie about what he had for lunch that day. It just came naturally to him. Apparently, so did cheating. He did that multiple times. We had many mutual friends, and I'm not the type to go to other people about my problems in relationships. I never told anyone about the times I caught him cheating or the literally hundreds of lies I caught him in constantly. This resulted in me looking stone cold most of the time, since he would go to our mutual friends saying I yelled at him and called him names. Yes, because I found out that he cheated on me yet again, for no reason. People started talking about the horrible way I treated him, how wonderful he was for putting up with me, how controlling and jealous I was, etc. After we broke up, I lost all of our mutual friends. He started dating a girl that he'd been cheating on me with. Of course, our friends didn't know that, and our friends welcomed her with open arms. The girlfriend herself even thought I was crazy, since she apparently had no idea that her boyfriend had a fiancé for the first 2 months of their relationship. The girlfriend and our old mutual friends would even post little passive-aggressive things online every now and then. I'm so glad we get to spend this Christmas together, my love. I remember how you described last Christmas. Hopefully this one was at least a little better, lol. And the like. To this day, the girlfriend, who is now his wife, has no idea. Our old mutual friends who all dumped me like a wet blanket have no idea. I'm just the crazy psycho ex-girlfriend who treated her boyfriend horribly, had major jealousy issues, was controlling, and who, thank God, is no longer in any of their lives. They all deserve each other. Story 15. I met my ex through a friend. Mind you, this was my first boyfriend ever, and I was just naive, as he stated. We spent the whole summer being around each other for days, weeks, months, and he was my first for everything. The end of the summer, the very last day, I overheard him talking to his friends and my brothers. I don't even like her. Just trying to make her happy, you know? She's probably going to give it to me anyway. Funny how I remember exactly what he said. Anyway, I broke down crying that day. The next day, I just tried to confront him about it, and I couldn't do that without crying the whole time. He just called me crazy and said he only did this to get what he wanted. Still, I'm reminded of him every single day. Story 16. He left to go to a party in another country for 6 months, saying it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance. He's rich and travels a lot. He did this after I had been an emergency, even though he told me he wouldn't go because I was more important. But then he secretly made all the travel plans and lied to me about it. I broke up with him after the 5th missed or very late Skype call. He picked the times. We still talked sometimes after a month or two. He told me how much he missed me and how excited he was to see me again, hinting that he wanted to get back together without saying it directly. When he came back, I tried to get back together with him. He was my first love. We learned a lot from those experiences. But he said he wanted to stay single for now, even though he kept saying we would definitely get back together, just not yet. I didn't want a girlfriend at that moment, and he said this for a whole year. He lied about starting to date another girl. He kept telling me not to date other people because it would upset him. He led me on until I found out the truth and got upset. He didn't think it was a big deal. I stopped hanging out with our mutual friends, who he lived with. They thought I was being silly. Then one of his friends mistreated me. When I told him, he decided I was lying. He and all his friends tried to make me believe I'd made it up, even though the friend admitted he had done it to other people too. So now they call me the crazy ex. In reality, I could have probably handled everything better, but I just had an emergency that ended my sports career, and dealing with a significant loss in the family. My heart was being broken over and over by my first love, who had told me many times he wanted to marry me. Story 17. Dated a guy for about a month. A coworker. Oops. I thought we had a pleasant few weeks, so I genuinely have no idea what happened when he got all weird and dumped me one day at work. His only reason was that he is the most indecisive person. I guess he didn't want to be in a relationship. I didn't really get a clear answer. A week later, he got a new girlfriend. I was devastated. When he made the relationship public, I commented on it with, "Congrats, don't forget to hit it and quit it." He blocked me. Several of his friends called me crazy, and he sent me text messages about me being a nightmare, driving him crazy, all kinds of stuff. Unfriended, blocked, cold silence at work from there on out. A few months later, he was unemployed and I got a job somewhere else. He hit me up on Facebook one day, asking if I knew anyone still at our old job and if I could put in a good word for him. Was I really crazy? Story 18. I'm the crazy ex-wife. During our 10-year relationship, married for 6, he was chronically unemployed. He'd work for a few months and then get fired for being late. He had a habit of staying up until 3 or 4 a.m. playing video games and then oversleeping. He'd get warned at work for his tardiness and I wouldn't leave the house until I saw him wake up, but he'd go back to bed after I left. But he'd always get fired and it was never his fault. Someone was out to get him. He did take some classes and eventually got a master's, which I paid for. I paid for everything since he was awful with money. I'd go to pay rent from our joint account and the check would bounce because he had to buy some new video game. During the divorce, I discovered he had several maxed out credit cards and had tried to open more in my name. Luckily, I had an idea he was up to something and put a fraud alert on my SSN. I was working full-time this entire time, and for several years had 2 jobs, part-time evenings and weekends. He did nothing around the house. I'd get home after work, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at one job, then 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., and there would still be dishes in the sink, laundry piled up, trash all over the floor. I'd ask for help. He'd be good around the house for a couple weeks, and then he'd slide back into laziness. We went to marriage counseling, and he twisted everything I said. I'd answer the therapist, and then he'd translate. I really meant something else. He talks over the therapist and translates for her as well. I realize now we should have found another therapist, but at the time, I didn't know any better. After years of our marriage being awful, he must have sensed I was getting ready to leave him, so he started asking me to have a kid. I was his meal ticket. He didn't want me going anywhere. That's when I began to panic. He couldn't remember to feed the cats, and yet he felt he was ready to be a father. I started confiding in a friend from work. We developed feelings for each other, and he helped me get up the courage to leave. Well, before I could actually leave, my ex found out what I was planning, and it was all my fault. I drove him to it. After I left, he called my parents, my friends, my family, telling them I was a lying, cheating woman, that he was blindsided. He called one of my cousins so much that she threatened him with a restraining order. I did eventually get free. However, he told everyone and anyone that I ruined her perfect marriage. I cheated on him, and that I was an awful, unsupportive wife. I was the reason he had so much debt, and I spent all our money. I said nothing to defend myself from all his accusations. Story 19. I guess I'm crazy for looking at my now ex-boyfriend's phone. But in my opinion, if there's something to find, then I wasn't crazy. My hunch was just really good at telling me something wasn't right. Plus, some things that had gone down in the relationship led me to believe something fishy was going on. So it's not like I looked under a context where I had no reason to think something was going on or that he was lying to me. When I looked in his phone, I found out he was lying about some major stuff that he knew would hurt me. It broke my heart because I never wanted to be that girl who would snoop on her boyfriend. But I've always had a pretty good instinct, and if I hadn't looked, he would still be lying to me to this day, and I would be none the wiser. So I guess I don't identify myself as the crazy ex, but I know some people who would think that I am. But I don't think those people have really ever had to experience the feeling of not knowing whether or not the person you love was being deceitful. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video. Crazy exes. Were you genuinely that crazy or just misunderstood? Tell your side. A young guy who has only loved once isn't really geared to cope with losing the one person he's ever felt strongly for. As a child, you try and bargain your way into everything, striking deals with parents or teachers, and when you don't get what you want, there is usually compromises upon the horizon. As an adult, people leave you in the blink of an eye or change overnight. There's no way to compromise or make a deal with someone who no longer wants to love you. When that happens, you're just left throwing every emotion you have at a person. I'm fairly certain I seem crazy, but trying absolutely everything and failing over and over again appeared to be the only option. Story 2. I was a crazy ex. I have no freaking clue what came over me. He was my first serious boyfriend, and both being in our late teens, we sort of outgrew each other after 18 months. We split up amicably and remained close for a while, but we kept slipping back into the casual affection we'd always shown each other. We'd be walking together and suddenly realize we were holding hands. We agreed to put some distance between us to help us both move on. That's when the crazy hit me. I don't really want to go into detail, but I did all the classic crazy ex things. Texting him constantly, threatening, etc. I plummeted into a deep depression and somehow blamed him for it while believing that we could get back together. despite the relationship having come to its natural end. It felt like a bereavement to me. I don't remember how it came out of crazy mode. I guess it just wore off after a while. I'm deeply ashamed of it all now, but it was over a decade ago. Maybe I reacted that way because he was my first love, and at my young age, 18 months seemed like a long time to have been together. I knew I was acting totally crazy and over the top, but I didn't care. I just wanted him back at any cost. It was really out of character for me to be so wildly out of control. I'm a very introverted and private person. I rarely let others know how I'm feeling, but this was like some sort of emotional sickness. Story 3. I've done a couple of things that could make me crazy, but I have my reasons. Every single relationship I've had, I've been cheated on, so that starts getting to your head. A relationship that I was in 2 years ago was going really, really well, so I did whatever I could to make it work. In the meantime, I was super paranoid about getting cheated on, and then I started to get mad at him for almost everything. I literally went crazy on him. I threw stuff, I punched stuff, I made nonsense remarks and all that. Well, he needed to go to CT for a conference. He was working on his math PhD at the time. Well, still is. And that's when I went even crazier. I didn't hear from him the entire time. Well, he came back and apologized and said he was stupid busy while he was there. That's when I realized I had to let things go and became a better person. 2 weeks later, I found out that he was cheating on me at that conference with his wife. Oh my God. Biggest plot twist. Story 4. My first love was a bag full of crazy, but in an odd way. Just cruel, I suppose. She lost her V-card to me and we were planning on getting engaged. But after she lost her V-card, she turned into a borderline intimacy fixation. I couldn't keep up with her at all. If we had less than 2 hours of intimacy daily, she'd insult my manhood and make fun of me in front of all her friends. She'd cut me off and, as I found out later, would fool around with lots of other people during that downtime. She'd also make a sport out of fooling with someone else and then seeing how quickly she could get me over to be with her. I was genuinely used. Odd. Doesn't feel good. Some guys really think that her type would be fun, huh? But the worst is that once she finally broke up with me, she'd call every day or every other day to let me know who she fooled around with while we were together and how and what day and how she came over right after. And she'd only tell me one person or event at a time. So for at least 2 weeks after the breakup, I'd get a call where she'd go into detail and then called me to come pick her up. But then she told all her friends so they could come out of the parking lot and watch her as she ran up to give unsuspecting me a big old kiss and laugh at me. There were lots of instances like this. And once I stopped answering the phone, she'd write out the stories via text. Vivid detail. I cried and retched a lot. She was just evil, I suppose. You were either dating a psychopath or Satan himself. Story 5. I ended up becoming crazy, but not towards him. My ex-boyfriend was a cruel, manipulating schmuck who pretty much brainwashed me into believing everyone, including my family, was against our relationship. I began to accuse friends and family of being jealous when they would suggest I should leave him because he would hurt me. And in my screwed-up thought process, I thought that meant loved me more. When we finally broke up, due to a huge fight where I finally defended myself and he was arrested, I still was obsessed with wanting to be with him, contacting him, saying sorry, and he was feeding me lies and BS about us getting back together, but for that to happen, I would have to not testify. So I refused to testify, and that's when he made it clear we weren't getting back together. I regret not testifying, since the girl before me did the same thing, but she as well never testified. I was under the impression she was a psycho liar, after which my entire ordeal and receiving a message from one of his recent exes about his behavior, I in turn realized he was the crazy one. And you were all manipulated. Story 6. When I was 18, my girlfriend tried to blackmail me into staying with her via threats when I broke up with her. I still cared about her and didn't want any of that to happen, so I did the only thing I could think of that wasn't caving into her demands or allowing her to hurt herself. I called her dad and explained everything, and emailed him the AIM logs of her telling me these things. I got calls, texts, and AIM messages from her friends and guys she dated for literally years afterwards about how I made up lies to her parents and ruined her life and told me how they were going to harm me. Her story was that she broke up with me and I faked all the evidence to get back at her for dumping me. As far as I know, she still may be telling the story of her crazy ex who tried to get revenge against her by telling lies to her parents. Should have brought it to court. Story 7. So, right after college, I moved 2,000 miles to live with my fiancé. I had no job and knew no one. Eventually, I got a job, but still had no friends and was incredibly depressed. After about a year with no warning, on the day my mom came to visit to pick out wedding dresses from a different state, the fiancé took me to the side, said he was leaving and he needed to move out in a week and drove to his family's home about 4 hours away. No explanation. No nothing. Furious and hurt are both understatements. I ended up moving out, going to therapy 2 times a week and was on medication. So he comes back, and I'm in a new apartment, and he decides to rethink things and asks to come visit. I had already taken my medicine for the night, but jumped at the chance he may have changed his mind. Well, he came over, and apparently we had intimacy, but thanks to the medicine, I have no memory of that. That night ended in the happy surprise of 2 positive home pregnancy tests. Again, the complete and utter despair I felt was overwhelming. I was ready to end it all and couldn't get out of bed, and the dependence of meds to keep me functional enough to work was increasing. I went to the OBGYN to get a test. Luckily, the test said I was not pregnant. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed with a more aggressive strain of HPV. Turns out before fooling with me, the fiancé had gone back to his college town and fooled someone else. That was the point where depression turned insane. I was hospitalized for 2 days, so, yep, I was a crazy ex, and I am sure in his eyes I was unreasonable. There are always 2 sides to a story, though. Well, I hope he gets an untreatable STD soon enough. Story 8. I went crazy on my first failed love. We broke up, got back together for a month, and then he called it off for good. I cried myself to sleep for 6 months, every night. Whenever I saw him out, I would stand in front of him and try to speak, but just cry in public. Standing in one spot in front of him and just crying until he got up and walked away. I didn't care who saw. I just wanted him to know how much pain I was in so he would take pity and love me again. He called me once to find out if it was okay that he went on a date with a mutual friend. I said okay, then called him back 5 minutes later, screaming and crying. He eventually left the country to get away from me. I think he still loved me, but knew we weren't a great fit. Big age gap. I called him before he left and said I would go with him. That's her last chance. He politely declined. In retrospect, he was really well behaved in the face of all this and was never nasty to me. It took me 5 years to get over him. Learned my lesson, though. Jeez. Story 9. I hate it when someone starts a sentence with, I had a crazy ex. I was 15 and she was 14. My goodness, I found your problem. Granted, there are such things as genuine mental issues as a young person that follows you. I'll not discount you if your story involves serious issues, but constant calls and texts to a young brain is so much different from an adult doing it. But can we all agree that we were crappy 14-year-olds? We were all crazy and deserved no one. Agreed. Story 10. I was once with someone who brought the worst out of me. It lasted for years and I lost who I was. But now I'm slowly going back to my old self and looking at it from afar. I was completely out of character with my inexcusable behavior out of pain and being lied to and used for years. I made someone the center of my life, and that place was really not for her kind. Now I realize that moment in my life stands out in an otherwise plain and eventful existence. I don't mind living my life the way I do. I like working for things. I like taking safe steps. I like taking my time for things that are worth taking my time. I wasn't crazy. I was stupid. The idealized version of her, the one she carefully lied about, was worth it. Who she really is isn't. At least, not my time. And hopefully she'll from now on get treated the way she truly deserves. Nothing more, nothing less, be it good or bad. That is really not my role, and time will put this person in its rightful place. Right next to other people who once meant a lot and are back to just being plain people. I don't remember how they felt or how they smelled or whether my heart rushed at their thought or not. Acting crazy was a desperate attempt to make sense out of a giant pile of BS, and I will never know the truth. So that's over. Let life get her back. Everything we do always ripples. Yep, karmic justice. Story 11. I hate the term crazy ex because I have depression issues and limerence, and it's a horrible thing to be called crazy over something you can't help. I haven't dated in such a long time because I don't want to be considered a blubbering, lifeless mess anymore by a person I once trusted to understand my issues. Also, as I am a completely confident person, it's horrible to be degraded to thinking someone is living rent-free in your head 80% of your day. It makes me feel weak and breaks that confidence completely. I consider myself a logical person as well, and it's hard to not know why you're feeling away, and you can't help it, even though you're thinking something very different in the brain. I've been there. I getcha. Story 12. I imagine I was an ex's crazy ex, but here's my side of the story. We did tons of stuff together. He was really sweet and would insist on taking the bus with me back to my home to make sure I made it there all right. We would spend lots of time together. So much so my friends, ones who give me advice later on, complained that they never saw him. I did push him to do things with his friends. I wasn't monopolizing his time. Then suddenly one day I couldn't get a hold of him. We were young, so each of us lived with our respective parents. His mom was an old European immigrant whose English was very poor. She didn't like me from the beginning. His dad did, though. When she answered and said, "Name not here. Call back at 8 o'clock." I thought for sure she was lying and had some ulterior motive. I did call back at 8 o'clock, but she yelled at me to call tomorrow. He was using the bathroom, taking a bath or shower in bed, whatever. This went on for a while, and I even complained to friends because I had no idea what the heck was going on. Was he not getting the message from his mom? Was anyone else able to reach him? My friend said, maybe stop calling so much? But I was confused. How could not calling help me reach him? Turns out he had decided that he'd had enough of the relationship and was hiding behind his mom, hence the excuses, and had even gone as far to tell my friend why, and that's why she gave me that particular advice. Thing is, if he'd just been a man and talked to me about it, while upsetting, yes, I would have stopped calling, etc. Yeah, that was a wuss move on his part. Story 13. I strongly believe that a lot of crazy ex behavior is due to the dumper not being honest enough. We're so terrified of hurting each other's feelings that we end up with a, it's not you, it's me, and I'm not ready for a relationship right now crap. When actually you're leaving them because you're bored of them, or they have annoying habits, or you fancy someone else, or they're crazy, or you don't like the way they treat you. Yet still, when it comes to the crunch, it's, can we just be friends? Blah, blah. Well, of course, when you let someone down that gently, if they really love you, they're going to think there's a chance you can get back together. This goes especially for people who call exes. If you keep dangling food in front of their noses, how do you think they're going to react? Don't misuse your position of power as the dumper. Be honest, if not cruel. Just explain carefully and rationally what went wrong, straight away. It's easier said than done, but not that I didn't do it. Story 14. My ex was a sociopath and everything that comes with that. The worst relationship I've ever been in. It was back in 2010. Lies, lies, lies. It began with yelling at me, trying to control where I went to work, and when I didn't, tried to control what I wore and what was appropriate for work. He isolated me from my friends and family. I was just too embarrassed to tell anyone about it. I never felt so lonely in my life. Eventually, things took a very toxic turn. I started spreading false claims, telling my friends that I'd been involved with them and accusing them of something serious like having AIDS. It was all a complete lie. I finally decided to leave and he hurts himself. How do you leave someone who's trying to hurt themselves in front of you? How do you walk away from that? I had it all over me and had to take him to the hospital where he threatened me to not say a word about what really happened. He was always using manipulation to control me and he never felt bad for anything he did, no matter how wrong it was. I didn't know what to do. So we stayed together another 5 months before I had enough. I called the cops on him because I wanted him out of my apartment, and he realized how serious I was about leaving him. He went crazy, attacking me, even though at this point his cruelty did not consist of physical cruelty, but just verbal or emotional, etc. So when I called the cops, his behavior became the same physical cruelty that I used to get from him 5 months back. I panicked and hurt him. I used to box, so my jab is superb. And well, got myself arrested for self-defense, but at least I got out of that relationship. I haven't seen him since, and I want to keep it that way. I got a restraining order until 2015. Today, I am with the most amazing person I could have ever wished for. I'm much, much better now. I wouldn't have taken him to the hospital. Story 15. I harmed my first girlfriend. Nothing serious, but enough to scare her. She'd been hot and cold on me repeatedly for months and was the first girl I fell in love with at age 14. She would, for no reason, tell me she was breaking up and then would try to get back together a week later. As we were in school together and even sat next to each other in some classes, this was really hard to deal with. One time, she went too far and gave me the, it's not you, it's me reason, and everything went red. Next thing I know, I'm in the headmaster office. I had to go to counseling, but she left the school after that and I never saw her again. Other peoples came up to me afterwards and told me how much they hated her, so it ended well. She might think I'm still out to get her, and I'd still like to apologize to her, though, given the chance. Yeah, I don't know what you did, but yeah, I think you should apologize. Story 16. I'm crazy, but I'm not quite an ex yet. I'm very lucky to have a partner who somehow is able to cope with my madness and understand when I just need time to be insane before I can cool down again. That being said, there are just moments in a relationship when I just feel I lose all control of my sanity. I've done things such as putting myself on sleeping medication, walking long distances, and putting myself in risky situations. In those moments, I knew I was acting crazy, but I didn't care about myself or the future consequences of my actions. All that mattered was that I made it very clear that I was upset, and that if I didn't get what I wanted, my partner would have to feel the guilt. I did have fair reason to be upset with the issue we had. However, my reaction was far from appropriate. Also, some of these reactions were to things that occurred in their life before I'd even met them, which is just ridiculous on its own. Just the other day, my partner tried to leave my house because of a fight we had. Within a 30-minute period, I went from acting indifferent about their leaving, angry that they would leave, and told them not to ever come back, heartbroken that I was being abandoned over a little fight, physically crazy towards objects, not people, when I wasn't making any progress in convincing them to stay, till finally just began begging. All this can just go away right now if you don't leave. The rest of the day can be perfect, I said. When When that didn't work, my final attempt was to just lay in their windshield until they finally caved and told me to get in the car and we went out to eat. On a happy note, I kept my promise and we had an awesome night. I'm constantly apologizing for my craziness and I'm seeking therapy so I can soon live a non-crazy life. Fun fact, I am male and my partner is as well. This should be a series. Story 17. He's not a Redditor, so his stories have never been posted, but his friends and family think I'm a crazy witch. Crazy because he thought I was cheating, and instead of calmly proving otherwise, I threw a chair at him and broke his thumb. Misunderstood because I left my laptop on and open in the kitchen because I was checking my email when he came over. He immediately walked over and started scrolling through and clicking on messages. Understandably, right? My reaction was, "Dude, what are you doing?" And I closed my laptop. He freaked out, thinking that I was hiding something and was cheating on him. He started picking things up and throwing them at me. They did this a lot. I have a guinea pig, and he proceeded to kick his cage. At this point, I picked up a chair to protect myself, and as I was lifting it, he put his arms out in front of it, and the chair hit his thumb. Number 2, crazy because he sent me to jail. Misunderstood because he finally agreed to pay me back money he borrowed almost a year ago if I gave him a receipt. I wrote it, signed it, and he took the receipt without giving me the money. In an attempt to stop him from leaving, I took his glasses off his face so we could do an exchange. In the process, I accidentally scratched his nose. Not a big deal. Didn't feel or notice it, and we stuck around for 30 more minutes talking things over. We then parted ways and went home. Next thing I know, 3 cop cars show up and lock me up. I got let go with no charges, no court, no bond or bail, and all the law enforcement involved laughing at the ridiculousness of the situation. But I was locked up for over 24 hours, denied vegetarian food and the medication that I take daily, sleeping on the floor. And I hope they experience the same thing. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 18. In all of the instances of my being a crazy ex, they wanted intimacy. I wanted more. I told them I wanted more, and they strung me along for the intimacy instead of being upfront and walking away. The first time a guy was upfront about only wanting an FWB situation, I don't want to be attached after a string of schmucks who just used me for intimacy when they could have moved along. I was ready to try something new and have all parties be honest about their intentions. Turns out this FWB falls in love, and I turn into the schmuck. Sure, after a year I loved him, but not in a be with you forever way. 3 years after it ends, I still get random emails from him about how awful I am for stringing him along. It hurts because I was very careful not to lead him on. I told him it wasn't forever. I cared for him, but I was not going to be his wife ever, period. It's almost insulting being someone who was actually led on and lied to and was given false promises. I hope he finds what he wants out there. Story 19. Okay, I've been there. I was in this on-again and off-again situation in my very early 20s, which I now realize is a very bad idea. But hey, fell in love. During an on-again phase, I had a really awful feeling about the guy and this one girl. I tried my best to work past it, but it made me so upset. Every time I caught him lying or hiding his phone, I asked him if there was anything, and I would understand since we were broken up at the time. He said there was never anything and never would be. That would have been the end of it, but it wasn't. However, for me, I couldn't set the feeling aside, and I felt like I was sabotaging my relationship because she kept showing up everywhere, and I kept catching him in lies. He told me he only lied because he wanted to avoid a fight since I was so paranoid about the situation. Finally, a year later, the day after we had a fight, he said he was going out for lunch with some friends. I went out with my friends, and I saw her waiting outside the restaurant. She looked uncomfortable. Despite the situation, we had never actually spoken to one another. I went to the bathroom, called the guy, and told him I knew he was going to see her and that they had to go eat somewhere else because I was with my friends. He told me I had no right to tell him what to do, ever, and that I couldn't control his life. I didn't want to face that situation, so I quickly went outside and introduced myself to her, apologized for how things were between us. Said I realized she was going to meet him and asked if they could eat somewhere else. She just smiled uncomfortably and said after she saw me go in, she was going to suggest the same thing. At this point, she was kind and I felt guilty, and I apologized for how uncomfortable things were. She said she understood, and then said, "But I hope you understand there's nothing between us anymore. Me and him are just friends now." At which point, anymore? And she outlined the fact that all those times in the past year I was going slowly insane, they were actually together. She thought we were broken up, that he had lied and led both of us on. Of course, I explained what I was told. She looked sorry, and I told her it was okay. Then, finally, the schmuck shows up across the street to come to lunch. She looks at him, raises her shoulder, and walks away. I go and lose my freaking crap like I never had ever in my life before. And that was when I was the crazy ex. It was justified. Story 20. I dumped this girl I was with because she started to control every aspect of my life. I figured if I lied about what happened to my newly dumped ex, we could be friends. It snowballed into a crap storm, and I had to do all I could to not get her wrath. This meant I had to go out of my way to be crazier than her. She went ahead and fooled with one of my friends to anger me. Sent her a picture of me sleeping with her cousin. She spilled my secrets and life story to everyone we knew. I accidentally left her SD card in one of the school's computers. She befriended a couple girlfriends that are close to me to get information on me. I ended up fooling with them too. She then broke down and deleted me from every social media that we're connected with to get away from me. I got hired as a manager for a new job where she was desperately trying to get an entry-level position. I'll be interviewing her for the position. She just doesn't know it's me yet. Give us an update, please. Story 21. I'm not sure if I count. I dated a sociopath in high school and he was a master manipulator. He scared me into staying with him, manipulating my reality to the point that I felt like nobody. No authority could protect me. To some extent, it was probably true. He also managed to convince everyone but my parents and my best friend that I was heartless and feeling and manipulating him. I won't go into the details of our relationship, except that I was able to leave him when I moved away for college. I checked in regularly with mutual friends to see what his mental state was like. Would go into rages in which he wanted to hurt whoever he felt had wronged him, and to ensure that I still had 5 states between us. If I knew he'd been driving through my state at a certain time, I made a point to never be alone. Probably sounded like a stalker to these people. I found out a few months into my freshman year that he had knocked up someone. Over the next 9 months, I reached out to these mutual friends, begging them to please keep an eye on the girl, make sure she didn't have bruises, and keep an eye out for signs of cruelty. I was told that I was jealous, obsessive, that I needed to move on. I thought that screaming, crying infants would send him over the edge and that he'd take it out on her. She had twins. She was in one room taking care of one. He was in another room taking care of the other. By the time he handed the infant to his grandmother, it was gone. He did not go to prison. There was no physical proof and nobody could get their story straight on what happened. The girl is still with him and has another kid. I'm still thought of as a crazy ex to a majority of those people from that time in my life. He'll get what's coming to him. Hopefully. Story 22. Yeah, I was the crazy ex. To the other girl he was seeing. We'd been living together, talking about marriage, and when his side piece found out about me, he told her I was the crazy ex who didn't want to let him go and would stop by all the time. Yes, I would stop by the house where I lived for 2 years, because I lived there. When I found out about her, I moved out that day. When I was moving out, he got physical with me because he didn't want me to leave. But when she reached out to me later and told me all the crazy things he had told her about me, I had to just laugh when she said, I heard you bit him. Yes, I did bite him. I'm sure he was scared for his life. What a wacko I am. Good of you to ask. There are always 2 sides to every story, especially when you date a sociopath. Good times. So why did you bite him? Story 23. I consider myself pretty sane and reasonable. However, there are people that have the ability to bring out the terrible and ugly in you. I had an ex that was a habitual over-the-line stepper, i.e. chatting up girls in front of me and getting their number because they were from Europe as he was, calling my cell nonstop when we fought, crying hysterically because I wouldn't return phone calls, spitting in my face, throwing my personal belongings around the apartment. It was really tough to deal with because I loved him so much, and to me, at the time, his redeeming qualities seemed to outweigh these nasty outbursts. It definitely brought out the ugly in me because he upped the ugly ante so much. Before I got out, I ended up with a charge, but thankfully was thrown out. What charge? Story 24. Was the crazy ex when I was about 16. Had this odd sort of long-distance relationship with a guy who was very on and off with his feelings. On multiple instances, he'd go from telling me he loved me and missed me terribly to an hour later saying I was too emotionally invested, needed to give him space. I thought I was in love with him. I realize now that I was just lonely. I was probably a bit overbearing, to be honest, but I was also in a constant state of hurt and confusion due to A, his changing his mind on me so frequently, and B, his constant posts on Facebook about other girls. How cute so-and-so looked tonight, how much he loved such and such, etc. At least once a week, we would have a big falling out where I would get upset over something he said over another girl, and he would tell me I was overreacting and that he'd always been this way. He was just friendly. Of course he loved me more than he loved those girls. He just couldn't make that publicly known because his mom didn't like me. What would happen to us if she was upset at him for liking me? I found out, also, that he frequently told her mutual friends about how crazy and overly emotional I was, and even made up stories about things I had said or done to make those friends ostracize me. After about 8 months of this on and off again deal, he ended things, and I was shocked by the fact that I didn't want to talk to him day in and day out. We'd been best friends before the relationship started. After 2 months of him constantly interrogating me about why I wasn't being more talkative and friendly, I told him I still had feelings for him and it was hard watching him move on to other girls. And he pulled this crap with, I still have feelings for you too, I just didn't think you'd forgive me and take me back. In my defense, when he ended things again 3 days later, that was the final straw. I didn't give a crap anymore, and 2 months later, just as he was trying to start things up again, I met a guy. An old ex tried desperately to talk me out of going out with this guy, and I blocked all of his numbers and accounts and cut all ties. Good riddance. Story 25. Every time this topic comes up, I feel like this needs to be said. Every ex of a narcissist is crazy. So if you're a crazy ex, double check your own situation for gaslighting and emotional cruelty or manipulation, which is often marked by excessive hubris on the part of your past lover. Narcissists flip a switch when they're done using you and they shun you. So a relationship is their favorite forum for cruelty, as it is a place in which cutting others off randomly and totally is normal and acceptable, plus the added benefit of you're wondering what's the matter or what happened and making a fool out of yourself. Humiliation and shame is an enormous draw for narcissists. Breakups are normal and happen. It's how the narcissist breaks up a person that sets them apart, as it has a humiliation imperative. It's very important for the narcissist to let you know that you're totally, irrevocably inferior to them and disposable. It's never driven by normal anger or grievances or conflict. If your ex is crazy in your opinion, for anything short of extremely outlandish and destructive behavior, like decisive attempts to control and terrorize you and possess you as an object, then seek professional help. It is perfectly normal for a person to have heightened emotional states during the end of a relationship, including grief, anger, confusion, needs for closure, and the like. If this seems crazy to you and you tell others about that crazy ex who kept bidding for these things and you think that's funny, and you interpret your ex's behaviors as threatening and evil and inferior or stupid, then you're in serious need for professional help. This cannot be overstated enough. Story 26. I drove 60 miles to his house after we broke up to give him back a heart pillow he had given me for Christmas because I couldn't hug it anymore without thinking about him. He wouldn't let me in, refused to come out, and said if I didn't leave right then, he was going to call the police. I left the pillow on the doorstep and just left. It sounded like he was scared I was going to end everyone in the house. Now, lots of people have told me that driving that far to deliver one thing is crazy. It probably was. I mean, I've been told I probably have Asperger's, but my intentions were innocent. I liked the drive, for one, and I guess I wanted to say goodbye in person. I was going to say my goodbyes and move on. After that, though, I realized I didn't deserve to be treated like I was going to hurt everyone after we were supposedly in a loving and trusting relationship. I got rid of my depression for months and was no longer interested in him. Story 27. I had an ex-girlfriend tell all our mutual friends that I had hurt her when she broke up with me and that I was emotionally and physically cruel. She neglected to mention that I had punched a hole in the wall of the bathroom, 2 rooms away from her, after she announced that she had just cheated on me with one of my good friends. So I definitely looked like the crazy ex-boyfriend. Lots of women avoided me for that reason without ever hearing my side of the story. She kept most of our friends in the divorce, unfortunately, so she was able to spin the breakup in her favor and make herself look really good. It was a dark, lonely couple of years for me. Having 2 of your best friends destroy your ability to trust people will do that. Story 28. I had a boyfriend who had a history of crazy exes. Lots of girls stalked him or sought revenge after he dumped them, and he was baffled by it. And he told me about this. I took it as a warning, since he was the only constant factor in all those bad breakups. After I'd been together for about a year, I'd got to know him well enough, and I'd heard enough about his exes that I had a theory. He was a bad breakupper. Not in the Seinfeld way, but he had a way of dumping women that would make most of them go psycho. The first reason was that he was a very open, loving, devoted partner. He had a way of making you feel like the most beautiful, interesting, and lovable person he had ever met. Not in a kiss bum way, just with a genuine warmth he had. The second reason was that once he decided that the relationship wasn't working, his feelings turned off like a switch. It would just turn cold. Nothing personal, he just moved on and wished you the best, but it felt nothing for you anymore. So yeah, that abrupt 180 was what drove every girlfriend crazy. It just didn't make sense, so they drove themselves crazy trying to get some reaction from him that showed a trace of the love he had for them before his sudden chilly indifference. They showed up screaming at his door in the middle of the night. They lurked by his office. They spread rumors at his job. He still ignored them. I explained my theory to him, and he agreed that I had hit the nail on the head. I could only hope that he wouldn't do the same to me. But after a year and a half of living together, he went on a business trip and fell out of love with me. Didn't cheat, but didn't fight. He just lost interest. Nothing has ripped my heart apart like that, before or since. I would have gone psycho on him, except that I'd always known he might do that to me. And I knew it was futile. It felt nothing for me, and there was no point in trying to get an emotional response from someone who doesn't care. So, I left peacefully. And I felt nothing but sympathy for all his crazy exes before me. This is a person who doesn't deserve love. Story 29. I dated a guy who turned out to be a schmuck for about 2 months, and he turned me into a crazy girlfriend or ex. It started off hot and heavy. He proclaimed that he loved me after just 2 weeks of dating. He would spend the whole weekend at my place and insisted on seeing me at least 3 other times throughout the week, even though I was working full-time and a full-time student. Then it just stopped. He would be sick for the weekend. I would show up at his apartment with some chicken noodle soup, and his roommates would say he was feeling too bad to get up, and I shouldn't come in so I wouldn't get sick either. It was actually out at parties. He would have made sure we would walk past his ex-girlfriend's apartment so that she might see us together. He wouldn't pay for anything, and I ended up spending a good chunk of my paycheck on groceries for him since he never had food when I was over. He finally sent me over the crazy cliff when he pulled the whole "I'm not feeling good, you go out without me" card. It was actually at a party with the ex-girlfriend. His roommate spilled the beans when I called looking for him. I drove to his apartment and ended up writing crazy crap all over his car in bright red lipstick. Things like, "This guy's a lying schmuck and hope you got disease from that witch," and "schmuck" on every window. The worst part is, even after I went crazy and wrote all over his car, he ended up convincing me to stay with him for another 2 weeks. I finally had a moment of clarity when he completely blew off Valentine's Day saying he forgot and dumped his bum. Story 30. I got pretty creepy on a girl that I had dated in high school. For like 10 years after we broke up, I wrote about 400 songs about her, including half a dozen concept albums, and a novel too. I put one of her rings in a chain and soldered it so I couldn't take it off. I also made an ultra-detailed map of her house from memory or satellite photos. We met up a few years ago and, well, I ended up creeping her out pretty good. Surprise. So even though I'm too appropriate to, wait outside of her house and do gross stuff like that, I think I qualify for crazy ex status. So why? My parents were workaholics and emotionally unavailable for my whole life, and I also grew up in the middle of nowhere and was alone all that time, until I was about 12. I don't love my parents. I have a hard time loving or feeling anything at all. I think the reason I got so creepy with that girl was that I loved her and I hadn't, at that time, loved anyone since. I also dated a load of terrible people after that. So I guess I imprinted on her because I didn't have anything else to attach to. I also broke up with her for silly reasons. In high school? No way. And regretted it. So that may have had something to do with it. But, hey, I'm better now. Define better. Story 31. I started dating this guy right before I turned 18. I had to go up to NC for a job over the summer, but ended up having to come home after a month. I lost my V card to him. While we were dating, he had t-shirts made that said Bree and Bree's Boy Toy. I told him to burn them because they were creepy and ugly. He wore the Bree's Boy Toy shirt when he went out with my friends and told him I threatened him if I didn't wear it. He starts to grow distant and I suggest an open relationship. I approve of girls he sleeps with, he approves guys I make out with. In a last-ditch attempt to keep him. I was an idiot, I get it. He ignores me for another girl for 2 days and finally lose it and dump him. The next 3 months was me finding out the sheer number of girls we fooled with while we were dating, before the open part of our relationship. He told people I cut his brake lines and that I urged him to end it all. I don't even know where brake lines on a car are, and I sure as heck would never tell someone to end it all. I lost most of my friends because he told them all this screwed up stuff that I never did. A good number of people apologized for listening to him about a year later, after he was involuntarily committed for mental health issues and dangerous behavior. Facebook suggested him as a friend and I looked at his profile. He apparently transferred this creepy paragraph that he wrote after we broke up about never loving again and never trusting women from his MySpace. I blocked him. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.